Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all back to the Boombox Guru channel. I'm your host, LB. So I know it's been a few weeks since I've actually done another video. I think, the last video I did was that Ginger video where I re-ranked their albums. But I just decided to take a bit of a break, and not, drop or do any videos, be in a rush to do any videos, man. I just wanted to take a bit of a break, and just kind of scale back on, working on videos and stuff all the time. Because sometimes you can get a little burnt out, when you're making videos and uploading them on YouTube. But what better way to come back with a brand new video than to talk about one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time? And that is The Infamous by Mobb Deep. Released in 1995, man. This was the legendary duo's second studio album. This was their breakthrough record. This was the album that really put them on the map and solidified them as one of the greatest hip hop duos of all time. You know, uh, Interesting though, me personally, The Infamous really wasn't my introduction into Mobb Deep. It was actually their fourth album, Murder Music, which I also have in my CD collection. Murder Music, that came out around 98, 99. I just remember the Quiet Storm remix with Lil Kim dropping and that getting so much heavy airplay on BET and everywhere. I actually was there. I actually remember the premiere of that video because BET was like advertising it so much at that time. But what really introduced me to The Infamous was actually years after Murder Music, man. This was probably around 2002, I believe. I believe it was 2002. It was the movie 8 Mile. Eminem's first major film. And anybody that's seen that film knows that the classic Mobb Deep song Shook One's Part 2 was featured prominently in that movie. It was in the beginning of the movie when Eminem's character B Rabbit, when he's getting ready for that first battle, and it's at the end of the film because it's the instrumental that Eminem freestyles over when he beats Papa Doc. And I think it might have been sprinkled in some other parts of the film, if I'm not mistaken. But I just remember when I first saw 8 Mile, I remember when I first heard the Shook Ones beat, man, because you got to understand the beginning of that beat, that introduction, man, that sample, that horn sample, that gritty horn sample, and then when that gritty beat drops in, it's very infectious, man. It really catches your attention. And I remember hearing that, and I didn't know it was Mobb Deep at the time, but I just remember really liking that song, especially at the end of the film when Eminem did that freestyle over it. And I was like, man, who is this group? And that hook, the hook in Shook Ones is just crazy, man. It's so catchy. It's hard, but it's catchy. So at the end of the movie, when the credits are coming, I'm looking at the songs to see what songs appeared in the film, and I found it, Shook Ones Part 2 by Mobb Deep. And that's what introduced me to The Infamous, man. And I remember when I finally got The Infamous on CD, first time listening to it, I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe that I missed out on this back in the day. I mean, granted, I was a little shorty back then. Back in 95, I was like, what, 5, 6 years old. So I wasn't really, I really wasn't up on things like older teenagers would be. But I still don't understand how this album flew under my radar at the time. But I was a little kid, so I wasn't really that honed in to like music. I think that would happen probably like 2 or 3 years later. But in any regards, man, when I first listened to The Infamous, man, I was just blown away. I was like, oh man, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I mean, everything from the production to of course, the lyrics, everything. Everything about this album makes it a masterpiece. And I know I say that a lot when it comes to talking about a lot of like my favorite hip hop albums, but you gotta understand, this was the 90s. This was the 90s, and there was a lot of classics, a lot of masterpieces being coming out in the 90s, man. I don't think a lot of the younger generation really understands how groundbreaking the 90s was, because there were so many classics coming out. And The Infamous is a record where it really helped to bring back the spotlight on East Coast rap music, specifically New York City, because I would say from probably 91 to 95, 96 maybe, I don't know, the West Coast was really dominant at this time when The Infamous dropped. So this album, The Infamous, Nas's Illmatic, Biggie's Ready to Die, uh, Wu-Tang Clan's 36 Chambers, of course. I don't know how I'm gonna forget that. Let me get a swig of water right quick. But and you could also throw Black Moons into the stage. J. Rue, The Damages, The Sun Rises in the East. You know, maybe to a lesser extent. I mean, those albums are classics too, but they didn't really get the look that like the aforementioned records did. But they really helped bring back the spotlight on East Coast rap, man, and they really helped to redefine hardcore hip hop, especially in the '90s, man. And The Infamous was a record that really did that. It really helped reshape that. And you know, it's if you ever want to talk about perfect hip hop albums, this is definitely one that should be on your list. And I'm gonna try to go through this album. I'm gonna try my best to try to pick out my favorite tracks, but to tell you the truth, this whole entire album is my favorite. Every track on this album is my favorite. That's just how good this record is. So the opening track, Start of Your Ending, 31st Side. That's the opening track. Probably one of the greatest opening tracks on the hip hop album. Havoc and Prodigy, man. They really bring you into their world on that particular song. They're really bringing the listener into their world and what you're in for. It really sets the tone of the whole entire album. I mean, the song is just dark, it's just gritty, just grimy, and both MCs, Havoc and Prodigy, are coming with top-notch lyricism. Now, before I begin, before I continue, I just want to let you know, I'm rocking the bandana right here, camo bandana in honor of Prodigy. R.I.P. to him, aka Bandana P. Decided to rock the bandana for this review in honor of him. But yeah, the Start of Your Ending, really set the tone of the album. One of the best opening tracks on this record, man. It's actually, when you listen to that song, it's almost like the beginning of a story, the beginning of a great book or novel that you're reading. But then we gotta. Well, I'm not gonna talk about the interludes that much, but the next track on the album, the next official song, is Survival of the Fittest, which is one of the singles from the record, man. This is one of my favorite Mobb Deep songs. Great song right here, man. Really like the beat. I really like the beat. It kind of gives me a little bit of Wu-Tang vibes, a little bit. I think it's kind of like that gritty kind of acoustic guitar that's light, that you kind of faintly hear on the rhythm a little bit. I think that's what kind of gives the Wu-Tang vibe for me, man. But man, Havoc actually spits one of my favorite verses on here, man. I really like Havoc's verse on this particular song. Of course P did his thing on here too, but Havoc really stood out to me on this one, man, because for one thing, I don't think Havoc really gets enough credit for being a lyricist, for being an MC. And I think this particular song is one of the many examples that showcases his skills as an MC. I mean, the way I describe Havoc is he's got this style that I always describe as razor sharp. It's just something about his cadence and his delivery, how he approaches the microphone, man, where his lyrics, he just comes off very lethal, and it's almost like a sword. It's almost like he's cutting you. He's deeply cutting you with a sword, with a razor sharp sword. That's the way I describe his style a lot of times, man. But he really showcases that talent on this particular track. Then the next one, Eye for an Eye. Oh man, deadly combination right here. This song features Raekwon of Wu-Tang Clan and Nas. Now you gotta understand the greatness of this particular track, man. This was 1995, so Wu-Tang is riding high. They're riding high off of 36 Chambers. I mean, the first round of solo albums are coming out. Raekwon hadn't dropped his album yet. He probably had been dropping some singles, but I don't think his album had dropped yet. His album didn't drop until August. Infamous came out in April of 95. But still, Raekwon was one of the standouts on 36 Chambers. And so he was hot. So that's crazy how all the individual Wu-Tang members, it's crazy how they raised their profile before any of them even dropped their solo albums. But Raekwon was one of the standouts. Then you got Nas. This is 95, so he's still fresh off of Illmatic. Which is another one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time. And of course, Havoc and Prodigy, this is their second album. But this was their breakthrough, and that Shook Ones Part One was heating up the streets, and everybody was on fire, man. Everybody was on fire on this particular track, man. It's hard for me to even pick a favorite verse on here because everybody brought their A game on that track, and the beat. Man, the beat is crazy, man. I mean, it's dark, it's gritty, man. Very menacing, man. That sample kind of makes it very kind of almost horror-like, man. The kind of crazy, like creepy violins and on the sample, man. It's weird, man. It's well, not weird, but it's just kind of scary in a lot of ways, man. Very very menacing track, man. But man, can you imagine if Mobb Deep, Raekwon, and Nas formed a supergroup off of this track? Can you imagine that they formed a supergroup and dropped the album back then? That would have been so crazy. But let's see, Giving Up the Goods. Give Up the Goods, Just Step, man. This is another single, man. Now this song right here, this is actually my favorite Mobb Deep song of all time. If I had a list of my favorite Mobb Deep songs, I'm pretty sure Give Up the Goods would be number one. And this was actually a song produced by Q-Tip. Q-Tip played a huge role in the Infamous, man. He played a huge role in the Infamous. I don't think people really know how much of a major role he played, but not only did he produce a few songs, but he actually mixed and engineered the whole entire album, and he also kind of came in and touched up a lot of the production. He kind of made a lot of the production on here sound a lot better. Even the songs that he didn't necessarily produce, he kind of like changed up like the kick drums and the bass. He really fine-tuned this album. And I think that's something that's not really told a lot about the major role he played in this album coming together. But this was one of the tracks that he produced under his alias, The Abstract. And you know something, when I first heard this song, when I first heard this whole album, I didn't even realize that was a Q-Tip track. I was always under the impression that Havoc produced the whole entire album, which he did a good majority of. But yeah, Q-Tip actually produced that song, and as I went back and revisited it, I kind of hear it now. I hear Q-Tip's stamp. I hear his stamp on this track. And because Q-Tip you can always kind of tell Q-Tip's production, especially back then. It was just a certain way that he had his snares, a certain way that he would have had the bass kick, and he always had kind of like that sultry kind of jazzy vibe around it. That's what this song has, man. Big Noid is on this song. Big Noid, a frequent collaborator with Mobb Deep. I always looked at Big Noid as being like the third member of Mobb Deep because of his frequent collaborations with them. But he's on this track and he has a standout verse, man. That says a lot because he's on the track with Havoc and Prodigy. But his verse was just it was really good. I think I read an interview somewhere. No, it was on Genius. Big Noid actually annotated his verse on Genius, and he said that verse is actually what got him his deal with Tommy Boy. I think he signed with Tommy Boy for like $300,000. They released his first album, Episodes of Hustlers, which is a classic, underrated album. I was listening to it today, matter of fact. But man, he had a standout verse. I think he got a hip hop quotable from The Source because of that verse. So I used to recite his whole verse by memory. Back in the day, man. I can't do it now. I kind of got to have the song playing before I can really do it, man. But killer verse from Big Noid on there, man. Temperatures Rising, next track on here. This is another one that was produced by Q-Tip. Also has Crystal Johnson on the hook. She really laces that hook, man. Beautiful voice. She laces that hook. She laces it. I really like this song. Very melancholy, very somber. I really did like that melancholy piano loop throughout it. A very great one of Mobb Deep's greatest songs, man. This song is actually about Havoc's little brother, Killah B. All Mobb Deep fans know about Killah B. That was Havoc's brother. He's no longer with us now. He passed away years ago. So R.I.P. to Killah B. But he was really in the streets, man. He was a street dude. He was really in the streets doing his business, man. And unfortunately, around the time when Mobb Deep was recording the Infamous, man, he ended up catching the police were trying to get him for a murder charge. Allegedly, he allegedly committed. They were trying to committed some murder allegedly, and they was trying to get him for that. So he was on the run, and the song "Temperatures Rising," man. This is Havoc and Prodigy's way of letting Killer B know, because they didn't know where he was at. He was on the run. They ain't know where he was at, and this was them just letting them know that that they were thinking about him and that they loved him and cared about him, and they was hoping that whatever the outcome be, it don't be nothing tragic. Cause I know Havoc was like, we didn't know where he was at, man. We didn't know if they was gonna arrest him or if it was gonna be like one of them cases where they bring him back dead or something like that. So this was a heartfelt song, amongst all the hardness of this album. This was a track that really showed the group's vulnerability, man. Something that I recognize a lot more now that I'm an adult. As a kid, on the surface level, you don't really realize that. But then you listen to a lot of these what they call gangster rap albums, and you hear a lot of the vulnerability that these artists present on there, that they really express on there, whether they're talking about dead homeboys or loved ones that they care about. And this was one of those many cases, man. Really, really dig that track. Up North Trip, another banger on this record. Interesting enough, man, in Prodigy's book, My Infamous Life, he talked about this song. And he said that initially when they was going to do the song, this was supposed to be like a more radio-friendly track. I guess like for the clubs and everything. But as they started to write it, it changed. And it became more about like, you getting locked up and doing the bid. That's what Up North Trip means. In New York City, when you get locked up in prison, you go upstate New York and do your time in one of those prisons up there, like in Rikers Island or, Rikers Island, that's about the only one I know. I think that's in upstate New York. I don't know. If anybody from New York that's watching this, y'all let me know. But that's what Up North Trip was about. That's what this song is about. It's about, you catching a bid and having to do some time. And I like how that song came together. And this, and production-wise, man, this song really ain't dark. It's really not dark. So that really kind of goes into what they were saying about how initially this was supposed to be like a more radio-friendly track, maybe for the clubs and everything, for everybody to bump. But it just, as they started writing, it went to something different, and I'm glad it did. I'm glad that Up North Trip became what it was, because I think if it had been something else, it would have been kind of maybe like a sore spot on the album. But with the theme and the subject that they went with, it actually keeps the album's momentum. So I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. Trife Life, that's the next track on here. Let me tell you something. Trife Life, that's another one of my favorite Mobb Deep songs. This song has such an impact on me. Because this song is a cautionary tale about you got to be careful. You got to be careful, man, when you meeting up with certain females and going to their neighborhoods and stuff. Because they could be setting you up to get robbed or to take your life. You could be walking into a trap. You could be walking into a sticky situation. So this song is a huge cautionary tale for a lot of people. And, that's something that I think is missing in a lot of mainstream hip-hop nowadays. Man, you don't get enough songs that send messages out there. Cautionary tales that try to teach people how to live a better life and be more aware of their surroundings, man. But man, this is one of the greatest storytelling tracks ever, man. Prodigy's his verse on this track, oh man, crazy, man. Cause Prodigy did such a good job on that verse, man, where he's like going into such intricate detail about him getting this phone call from this young lady who he hadn't been around in years, and she wants him all of a sudden to come by to see her, and as soon as he hangs up the phone, it's like his paranoia kicks in, his street smarts kicks in. He's like, hold up, I ain't talked to this chick in years, and even when it ended, I kind of broke her heart, man. It's like something might not be right here. So he talks about getting his guys together to go over there with him. He talks about everything that's going through his head when he's heading over here, like. He's thinking ahead. He's thinking ahead about the situation. Wow. He's like preparing himself too, in case the situation might go left. But he's talking about everything from catching the subway to certain blocks. He's describing certain blocks in the boroughs and stuff, and it's just crazy. And then Havoc's second verse. Now Havoc's second verse, the second verse from Havoc, that's what really got me, because he's rapping from the perspective of the dudes that had these chicks like set up people to rob him. So his part is more of like the cautionary tale. I mean, I mean, you could say P's too. P's part is more like showing you how you should think when going into these situations. You know what I'm saying? But uh Havoc's verse is more like when you don't think about that situation and you just blindly walk into a sticky situation. And unfortunately the victim ends up losing his life, getting robbed and losing his life. But I'm telling you, man, that really impacted me as as a youngster, man, because you never know. You have women, you have certain females that want you to come to their neighborhood, and then they might live in a sketcy area, and you know how it is in the hood. Like dudes don't like outsiders coming to the hood to mess with their chicks, even if them themselves aren't messing with those females. They don't want outsiders coming through smashing on their chicks. So it definitely makes you think. A female wants you to come to her neighborhood. You want to do research about this area, like where you live, like who's there, what's this area known for. So that had a lot. That influenced me a lot listening to this track, man. So I definitely urge anybody out there to go listen to this song, because it's definitely a great lesson from it. Let's see here. QU Hectic, man. Another banger on this track, man. Another banger, man. The beat is crazy on here. Hard hitting beat. I like the dark, like kind of synths in the background. It really makes the song very haunting. But my favorite part is the saxophone. I think it's a saxophone. It's like this frantic saxophone that pops up periodically throughout the song that makes it even more eerie and scarier, man. So that's another banger on here. Right back at you. Now, right back at you. This is another deadly combination, because not only does Raekwon come back, but he also brings Ghostface Killah, and Big Noid is also on this track as well. Another crazy song. Man, this song is gritty. I mean, the beat, that bass, man, that bass on this track is so dirty, man, when it hits, man. I remember I was coming from the bank the other day, and I was listening to this song. I turned up my stereo, and I was like, man, that bass is just gritty, man. It's so dirty, man. That song is gritty, man. And that piano loop, that sample, crazy sample, man. That makes it even more haunting. That makes this song even more haunting. But man, what a great track, man. Everybody on here just smoked that track, man. I mean, come on, man. Mobb Deep, Raekwon, Ghostface, and Big Noid, man. Everybody just was spitting straight flames on that one. Then we go to Cradle to the Grave. This was more laid back, but more still kind of somber too as well. It's laid back, man. But this song kind of tells the stories of. It's just them telling stories of like hustling out there on the streets, while they also are having to deal with beefing with rival crews, trying to invade the police, as well as dealing with snitches and stuff like that. That's what that song really talks about. As well as losing homies to the life and everything like that. I also read on Genius where the first verse from Prodigy was actually inspired by a real incident that happened in his life. And also the last verse that Prodigy spits, where he talks about a snitch, I think that may be inspired by true events too. If you listen to the song Temperatures Rising, Prodigy, in the beginning of his verse on that song, he talks about a snitch who allegedly ratted out Killer B, which is why he had to end up going on the run. So I don't know if that kind of relates to that particular person that snitched or whatever, man. But another dope song on here. Drink Away the Pain. Drink Away the Pain. This is another one produced by Q-Tip, aka The Abstract, man. I really like this one. This one's really jazzy too. It's really jazzy. You really you can really hear like that Tribe Called Quest vibe on here. It's really jazzy, but they talking about. I don't know if this song is really. I guess you can interpret this song in different ways. It could be like an ode to like their favorite drinking beverages, while simultaneously being them displaying how they deal with their pain, how they deal with their trauma. They just drink it away, and so you can interpret it either way. It could be like an ode to their favorite alcoholic beverages, it could be just both, an ode to their favorite alcohol beverages, as well as them expressing how they drink away their pain, how they deal with their trauma. These days in time, we know that's not very healthy, but these guys is from the hood. In the projects, that's how you usually deal with stuff. You drink it away, you smoke it away. But Q-Tip's verse, if you listen to Q-Tip's verse, his verse actually isn't about drinking. Because Q-Tip, he's not a drinker, to my knowledge. At least he wasn't then. But his verse wasn't about drinking. Uh, and Prodigy and Havoc really didn't make him change it. I think they just respected the fact how he was because Q-Tip was rapping kind of he was rapping kind of hard on that song. You know, he was rapping hard on that song, and I think they just respected the fact that Q-Tip was like coming to their world, and he was like kind of really integrating himself into what they was doing. So they didn't make him change it or anything like that. But Havoc and Prodigy's verses, man, I like how they take their favorite like alcohol beverages and they kind of personify it as females and so forth, man. So I kind of dug that about it. Then we go to Shook One's Part 2. I know I talked about this in the beginning of the video, Shook One's Part 2. You know, interesting thing about Shook One's Part 2 is that even on the explicit version of the Infamous, Shook One's Part 2 is still edited. It's still censored. I don't know if they ever released an explicit version of Shook One's Part 2. I might have to look that up on YouTube and see if anybody has that. I'm pretty sure there's one that existed, but yeah, even on the explicit versions of this record, Shook One's Part 2 is still censored for whatever reason. But yeah, Shook One's Part 2, breakout song for Mobb Deep. You know, Shook One's Part 1, I think, was like a mixtape track or underground thing that really got Mobb Deep buzzing in the streets. It introduced the new Mobb Deep sound. And Shook One's Part 2 was just so groundbreaking that, you know, it catapulted this album to where it overshadowed Juvenile Hell, which was Mobb Deep's first record in '93. But this was a breakthrough record, man. This is really what solidified Mobb Deep as a serious hip hop duo to reckon with, man. It really, you got these young dudes who were practically still in their teens or fresh out their teens, and they spitting some of the hardest lyrics ever with top-notch lyricism. Crazy. And like I said, man, Shook One's Part 2, easily one of the most recognizable songs in hip-hop. Soon as you hear that opening sample with them horns come in, and then that bass and that beat drops, you already know what it is. You already know what it is, man. So easily one of the most recognizable hip-hop tracks of all time. One of the greatest hip-hop tracks of all time, man. So, I mean, ever since I discovered it on 8 Mile, man, I've just always been just crazy about that track, man. And then the album ends with Party Over. This one got Big Noyd on it and Ty Nitty. Ty Nitty, I think, is a member of Infamous Mob. But the title, the way Prodigy, I'm getting this from Genius. The way Prodigy told it was like, the title refers to how a party is over when a fight breaks out. And the song was inspired by how, you know, the crew, how the Mobb Deep crew, like the extended Mobb Deep crew, I guess, were like how they would handle themselves. They experiences at parties with fighting with other rival crews and stuff of that nature. That's what this song really breaks down on this track, man. I like this track, man. It's cool. It's a little minimalist, but it's still dark. It's still gritty, and it's grimy. I like it. And everybody just comes with their A game on this track, man. They just killed the track, man. Really, and it was a great way to end the album. That's one thing I like about the Infamous is, you know, the way it was sequenced. You could tell that every track was placed where it should have been. You know, you got a beginning, you got a middle, and you got an end. So this whole album it's like a film. It's like a crime film. It's like a great crime novel that you, after you finish listening to it, man. But you know, it don't get no better than this, man. You know, I think I said this earlier, man. If you want a great example of the perfect hip hop album, this is one you need to check out. And you know something, I don't think that I could end this album review without bringing up Nas's Illmatic, because I think Nas's Illmatic and this record were some groundbreaking records to come out of Queensbridge. Now, listen, Queensbridge was on way before these guys. You know, you had the Juice Crew back in the day, Marley Marl, Roxanne Shante, and all of them, MC Shan. You know, the bridge was always on, but you know, I think in the '90s when Nas came out with Illmatic and when Mobb Deep dropped the Infamous, man, it just put a whole nother light on Queensbridge, and it really set off another wave of a new generation of talented MCs, because there's a lot of talented MCs that come out of Queensbridge, that come out of Queens, period. But like I was saying, when you talk about Nas's Illmatic in this album, so Nas's Illmatic, how I look at Nas's Illmatic is that album was more of like listening to a coming of age story of a young man growing up in the projects. The Infamous is like listening to a crime story that's bringing you to the darker side of Queensbridge, and it's got all these cautionary tales of what happens, and the struggles of growing up in the projects, in the hood, and in the dangerous and violent environment, what it can entail with you, man. There's a lot of cautionary tales on this record too, but it also is bringing people who may not be familiar with that type of world. It's giving them a reality check of what people that come from that world have to deal with, and what they do to survive as well. So that's how I look at this album. But what a masterpiece, man. What a masterpiece of an album. I'm telling you, if you've never listened to The Infamous, what you doing? What are you doing? You need to go check this album out. This is one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. You know what I'm saying? And I can't find any flaws about this record. I can't find no flaws about this record. You might could say maybe the interludes, but the interludes are cool. I don't have them on my iPod, but still, the interludes are cool. But I would be hard pressed to find anybody to say anything negative about this album. If they do, maybe they just not a Mobb Deep fan. But perfect record from start to finish, man. Ain't no whack tracks on here, nothing weak, anything. Just perfect, man. It just all flowed so well together, man. And a big shout out to Mobb Deep, man, for producing this record. Even today, this album continues to be on greatest hip hop albums list. It continues to be on. It continues to top them. So just a great record, man. And a big shout out to Havoc, a Mobb Deep, man. He's still keeping the Mobb Deep name going. You know what I'm saying? And R.I.P. to Prodigy, man. When Prodigy passed away, man, that was a big loss. That was back in 2017 when he passed, man. When he passed, that was a big loss, man. Cause everybody know Prodigy. Prodigy was the truth, man, when it came to the lyricism, man. Especially around this time, after this record, man, Prodigy was like Wayne was in like the 2000s, mid 2000s. Like Prodigy was hot. Everybody was getting him on remixes and stuff like that, on features, cause he was hot. He was just that hot, man. And Prodigy really came into his own on this record as a lyricist, cause on Juvenile Hell, he wasn't there yet. I mean, Havoc even had to wrote some of his rhymes on that album, but in between that album and this one, he just upped the ante. And then Havoc, as a producer, he produced a good majority of this album, which it really helped him to create not the Queensbridge sound. I mean, the Queensbridge sound was already there, but I think they really helped to bring the Queensbridge sound to the mainstream. But he also formulated the Mobb Deep sound, which G Unit ended up kind of taking and making it mainstream when they popped up on the scene. When they came out, not popped up on the scene, but when they came out. But yeah, everything about the Infamous, man, it really set the stage for one of the greatest hip hop duos of all time. And it's easy to see why this album overshadowed Juvenile Hell, man. You can honestly argue that the Infamous was Mobb Deep's true debut, honestly. But such a great record. Like I said, if y'all ain't never listened to this record, y'all need to go check it out. Especially for newer hip hop fans that want to get a bit of a history lesson, definitely check this out. This is definitely a gateway record, one that need to be on the top of your list to check out. But that's it for this album review. I'm sorry if it ran a little long, but I was doing this on the whim. I didn't take no notes or anything, man, because like I said, man, The Infamous, this is one of my favorite hip hop albums of all time. I listen to it all the time. So it was easy for me to do this video and just talk about these songs. And I talked about each and every song on this album. I said that I'm gonna try to pick out my favorites, but honestly, it's the whole entire album. And I was right, man. It was the whole album, cause there's no skippable songs on this record. Everything is just straight heat on here, man. But yeah, if you enjoyed this album review, do me a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up and give me a like. Helps with the algorithm. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button, tap the bell. That way you'll be notified when I drop new videos. Also, be sure to share this video too. And I want to give a huge shout out to everybody that subscribed to my channel, everybody that's been supporting and watching the videos. I really appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.